Welcome to Philosophy from the Frontline. This podcast explores the intersection of philosophy, entrepreneurship, and veteran transition. Join us as we delve into the minds of successful entrepreneurs who have made the journey from military service into small business ownership. Our guests will share their insights, experience, and unique perspectives on life, business, and the world around us. Through deep conversations and thought-provoking discussions, we hope to inspire and empower our listeners to tackle their own challenges and achieve their dreams. So sit back, relax, and get ready to explore the world of entrepreneurship from a veteran's point of view. This is Philosophy from the Frontline, and we'll see you on the high ground. Hey, welcome back. This is Philosophy from the Frontline, episode number 103. I'm your host, Rob Robinson. We have Chaz Sampson here. We're going to dive into his background story, but the first question that I'm going to ask you is, when I'm scrolling through your website and kind of looking at things, how in the heck did an Air Force dude end up in Virginia Beach? And that's not typically where you guys are. So I figure we'll start there, but then we'll dive into your background. And maybe you can just tell us your background and how you end up in Virginia Beach.
Yeah, so man, you about to be bedazzled here. So I was at the Pentagon in the Air Force as a civilian. I served in the Army. I was in the Army for 5 years, and I ended up in Virginia Beach because at the Pentagon, obviously that's in Arlington, Virginia. That's of course where my service is at. As far as a civilian, I really got tired of the DC rhetoric, so moving down to Virginia Beach on the beach was more my style, and so I moved to Virginia Beach, and now I live in Houston, Texas. So you're seeing me in my office here in Houston. So I just moved to Houston back in October of last year.
Okay. Wow. That's a transition in and of itself. And I'm
That's
sure
why I'm saying you can probably be bedazzled because
yeah,
there's so much going on.
yeah. And moves, and of course, moves happen in the military, but retirement moves or post-military career moves are always interesting because it's like, hey, where do I end up?
Yeah.
And usually, what to tell people is, you want to know the place or you want to know the job, but rarely, if ever, you're going to know the job and the place at the same time.
Right.
Sometimes it happens by happenstance. Other times it doesn't. But
Right.
we're here to talk about, what you're doing in the, veteran support space, and then what some of your
Right.
future prospects are. So if you don't mind, tell us about Chaz. What's your background? What made you decide to serve? What made you, continue serving? Because it sounds like you did some time in the uniform and then you did
Yep.
some time in the government service.
Yep.
So those are two transition points. And then, we talked about it before we jumped on, and there's some other stuff going on with you. But let's tell us your backstory. Let's get to know you a little bit better.
When I tell people my story, they are always shocked because I've done so much in such a short period of time. But I think the Army really trains you to do that, to accomplish a lot in such a short period of time. So for me, I grew up in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I was born in New Jersey, and my parents, like a lot of folks, their parents moved from Jersey to Carolina or New York to Virginia. That seems to be what happens. But we moved from Jersey to North Carolina. I grew up in Fayetteville, right at Fort Bragg. And I was infatuated with seeing guys jump out of helicopters, jump out of airplanes. And so I thought it was cool. I would go down to Sicily Drop Zone for those that served at Fort Bragg. And I would watch some of the guys jump. My aunt, she was 92 Fox, like myself, and she was also airborne paratrooper. And I would go see her jumps. And that got me really excited to join the military. So I did ROTC in high school. I graduated from Palm Forest High School. I went to two high schools, Westover High School, and then we moved to Spring Lake, North Carolina, and I went to Palm Forest. And then from there, I went to college and got my education. I have an undergraduate degree in psychology and a master's degree in finance and organizational leadership. So my finance is pretty much my background. Being in the military, so I left college at my sophomore year, went to the military, went to the Army, and then did 5 years, deployed to Iraq. I was in Germany with one ID, and I was with two ID. Well, actually, I was with 12th CAP, and it had changed. And then I went over to, I think it was 593rd Sustainment Brigade out of North Fort Lewis. And that's where I ended up leaving at duty station. And I left and finished my master's degree. And then from there, it's been one hell of a lifestyle afterwards. But I would say for all the listeners, the military was certainly a great foundation. I joined when I was 19, and now I am 39, and it's just been an amazing 20 years. And I've continued to serve, leaving the military. I worked in finance for a while at a dealership, and then moved to the East Coast, and I worked at the Department of Veteran Affairs, making the final decisions on VA claims. So guys and gals that file their VA claims, they get denied at the regional offices, which are 56 in the country. And then they come to one office for their appeal, and that's the office I worked at, which was the Appeals Management Center up in Washington, D.C. And so I would make anywhere between, I would say maybe 5 to 7 decisions per day.
Yeah.
On places. Yes, it's definitely a production mill for sure. Did that for about 2 years, some change, and then went to half A1 headquarters Air Force over the Pentagon, and I was doing labor relations, employee relations. So all your RIFs, adverse actions, labor negotiations, CBA negotiations. That's what I was doing. And then I started Seven Principles back in 2014 and scaled it ever since then, and just haven't looked back.
Yeah. And so that's a lot of ground to cover. So of course, grew up at the mothership. I'm like right around the corner from Pine Forest High School. So I'm still at Fort Bragg. So that's pretty cool. I think
North
you're like
side.
the yeah, you're like the first person that's like I know people that have graduated from there, but there are people that I know that, live close by because they're still in the area. But like
Yeah.
you're the first person that's transcended you broke the gravity well at Fort Bragg. So that's a good thing. So you moved. Uh, so it's interesting to hear you talk about the veteran transition piece, and
Yeah.
again, like there's a lot of frustration that comes with transitioning out of the military. Some of it
Absolutely.
is like being able to find a job. Some of it is like, hey, am I going to get my rating on time, or what is my rating going to look like? And all those things, can change the entire trajectory of people. And I'm not going to mention his name, but I have a friend of mine that is local here, and he had an open VA claim for 20 years, right? And so he started
Mhm.
it, never finished it, and like it's like, dude, like you're missing out on dollars. You know,
Right.
I don't know
A
how
lot
much.
of money.
Yeah, and I don't know how much you're going to recoup. After 20 years, because that it just depends. You're used to working the finance piece, so like when those things get adjudicated, you just don't know how much you're going to get back. But the other part of it is, it's not really as much about getting the stuff back; it's getting the stuff that you just need, right? Like
Right.
like financially, as a veteran, some people want to utilize their benefits
Mhm.
and not, work full time again.
Yeah.
And so there's some parts of the country where you absolutely can do that. Like if you own land or you have, something that to sustain you before you
Yeah.
get into the military, or like family property or something like that, you can continue to do that. But like in today's environment, it's less separation and more like rehirement is what I call it. So like you're going to leave the military and put on a different suit, whether that be a three piece or doing something else. But uh, that struggle is like 100% real. And
Yeah.
so as you, I mean that's got to be hard. But seeing that you're a finance guy, I guess you could make decisions based off of black and white evidence that's in front of you, vice the emotional aspect of it. And I think that's one of the difficult parts too, is not allowing yourself to get emotionally hijacked when you don't get that VA rating that you think that you're going to get. And hey,
Absolutely.
folks, guess what? As you're transitioning, you're probably not going to, you know,
Yeah.
like you're probably going to have to appeal at some point. So the sooner you start, and this is one of the things that I encourage people to do, the sooner you start your retirement, like if you say, hey, look, I'm putting that mark on the wall, this is when my terminal leave starts, back that off 12 months
Yeah.
and start working towards getting all your appointments and everything done and documentation and everything that you need to have. So when you do separate, you've already gotten all your appointments done, because one of the advantages of getting all your VA medical done while you're on active duty is they expedite it, right? So
Yeah.
after you've been
BDD.
out, yeah, so after you've been out for a while, like it becomes a little bit more problematic, just because like it's the VA. And if you live in Fayetteville like I do, there are a lot of veterans here, right? So
Yeah, absolutely.
there's a large, there's a large population of veterans that are impacted, and the earlier you get it done, the better. The more time you have to react if something doesn't go right is probably the easiest way to say it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about seven principles, because like I'm looking at the website, and the top line is most veterans are underrated and overdue for an increase in their VA disability, and they leave thousands of dollars on the table. And that was one of the things that like we just talked about, right?
Yeah.
Is like, how do I help that person who doesn't really know, what their situation is? Like, hey, look, you know what? I served for 5 years. Did I have some bumps, bruises, nicks, and scrapes? Like, yes. Are they documented? I think so. Talk us through that process. How would you help? Like, say, for instance, you're intaking me and I'm a new veteran that's applied or contacted you for assistance. Like, what would be your first actions?
Yeah. So first action, we get to understand it for your service. I want to see your duration of time. I want to see your MOS because that plays a factor, and get an understanding of what you have done while you were in military service, whether it was one deployment or 25 deployments, or whether you were in garrison the whole entire time you're in the military. That gives me a good understanding. And then I typically ask people to give me, using their index finger and their thumb, how thick are your medical records? Are they like this thin? Or are they that thick? Because that gives me an idea of how much evidence I can work with. My rule of thumb is 100 pages per year of service. So if you're a retiree that did the minimum 20 years, 20 times 100 is 2,000 pages. So I want to see at least 2,000 pages of evidence, because that will help me fight my case. The VA needs 4 things, and this is based off 38 CFR 3.303, the rules of service connection. I need an event of service, a diagnosis, a nexus, and the 4th thing that many veterans don't understand about is chronicity. How chronic is this condition? How does it change your life going forward currently? And of course, in the future, foreseeable future. So if you can understand how to say, look, I have a copious amount of evidence that supports my claim or supports a secondary condition of a claim, and I also have the chronicity to where this is when it started and this is not going to get any better in the future, then I shall be awarded 10%, 20%, or whatever that rating criteria is for that diagnostic code. That's the first step. And then from there, a lot of retirees, they may go through a free resource, or just veterans in general. It doesn't have to be retiree. It can be anybody that's transitioning. They may go through a free resource or do it themselves. I will want to see the history of the claim. So if there was past claims that were submitted and they were adjudicated and they were decided not in your favor, in your favor, how can we manage that and grow from it? Or how can I explain to the veteran that, yes, even though you claim PTSD, you were denied for PTSD, you cannot necessarily claim anxiety or insomnia, because those are all mental health diagnoses. So being able to understand how the rater adjudicates a case based on a diagnostic code and the rules of pyramiding, which is very important. People don't understand pyramiding. Understanding that dichotomy helps me break down the case. And I can do that I can look at a veteran's rating and their STRs, in a matter of an hour, I'll tell you exactly where you should be at percentage-wise.
Wow, that's impressive.
To the penny.
Yeah, and I think that's important, because again, transition is scary, and one of the difficulties that everybody has, and I talk about it, and I mentioned it. This is a drum I've been beating for years on the show. Is like, your transition is unique to you, right? And it's just like your ORB, your SRB, your performance evaluations, everything that you do in the military is unique to you. So just because, like, hey, I was in the same infantry battalion as that guy, he got 100%. I don't know why I didn't get that same rating. Well,
it doesn't apply.
what goes on underneath the hood is one of the most important parts, and I think that really is one of the things that is, like, as long as people have been transitioning from the military, I think that is one of the most cloudy parts of the transition, is just understanding how the VA processes medical documents and comes to the adjudication. And
Absolutely.
and it like, as the kids would say, the math ain't mathin', right? So it's like, hey, for instance, like, I walk in the door, and when I, sign on the dotted line at MEPS, I'm considered 100% of a person. And then over time, as those injuries and everything else accumulate, I'm getting rated against what's left, right?
Exactly.
And that's what people don't understand. It's like, well, I've got this condition that, like, hey, this guy's got a bad back. He got 70% for that. Well, why didn't I get 70% for that? Well, because you got a bad back, bad knees, PTSD, migraine, headaches. And so all those other conditions that are tied to that service member take away from that overall number, but it still affects the total. And, like,
Absolutely.
it's super, if you don't understand it, or you haven't worked in it intimately, then, you're missing out on some nuances that the VA uses to process your documents.
Yeah, so that's 38 CFR 4.25. It's called the whole body perspective. Everyone starts at 100%. And then, like you said, as you get injured, as you get ratings, as you get percentages, it takes away from that whole body perspective. So if someone has 100% and they're awarded 50% for sleep apnea, they take 50 from 100, which leaves us with 50. But let's say, for instance, you get another 10% for tinnitus. They take 10 from the 50 that's left, which is 5. Now you're at 55%, and the VA rates increments of 10, so it rounds up to 60. And so you're left with 45 points. So if you get another 10, that's 10 of 45, which is 4.5. 4.5 added to the 55 is 59.5. You're still at 60. So a lot of veterans get hung up in that dichotomy of, hey, look, I have a 50, a 10, and a 10. That's 70 points. No, that's 59 points.
Yeah. And it seems unfair, but it also is, like, that's just the way it's done. And it's always been that way, And I think one of the things that has gotten better, though, and I can say this, is, like, organizations like yours and all those other people that are out there that are trying to assist, they have a very good understanding. And so, like, if, you get what you pay for, And this is
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
easiest way to explain it. So like if you're a veteran and you're really, really struggling to get that rating, like, hey, I've applied, I've reapplied, and my rating hasn't moved. Now it's time to outsource it, right? Get
Right.
an expert that understands the policies and procedures that can get you the best benefit. And if you can't move forward with it, okay, that's fine. But at least you
Right.
tried, because
You should try
there's
it.
a lot of people that are suffering, that could be like, even if it's $100, right? If I get
Yeah.
10% and I'm getting like
10%.
$120 extra a month, like that's gas in your car.
That's tank gas,
That's
right?
right. That's something that you can do, that you've earned, right?
Right.
Like I've seen I had some crazy situations, and I'll talk about this one really briefly, and then we'll jump back into the questions. But like I had a soldier that got entry level separation,
Mm.
and about 6 weeks later, I got a congressional saying this kid was like trying to get 40% disability, and he made it through like 4 weeks of basic training. And I'm like, no, it's like, sorry, like he didn't even make it to his first enlistment. And like one of the things that you got to understand, the military is very, very much like, getting that second contract in the NFL, right? The
Yeah.
longer you stay in, the better
The
opportunities
better the
for you to
product's gonna
be,
be.
you know what I mean? For,
Absolutely.
for you to be rewarded on the back end of it.
Right.
And I hate to say it's a reward, but like you're being compensated, you're going to be compensated over time, the longer time that you spend in there. So like if you do 2 years, you know, yeah, you might get some disability, but depending upon whatever ailments that you're exposed to, like it may not be as much as you think that you're going to get,
You'd be
in the,
surprised though. You'd be surprised. I know
yeah,
some 4-year guys that I'm up the floor with a 30-year-old veteran.
yeah, that's
A
crazy.
30-year veteran, excuse me. Yeah, man. I know some guys that did 30 years because it's unfortunate. The unfortunate reality we have, at least in this side of the business, is that you get a guy that is deserving. We got this one client, I'm not gonna say his name. He's been shot twice. He has a Purple Heart. He also has, you name whatever accolade he had, he has it. He did 26 years in the Marine Corps, retires at E9. He has 400 pages of evidence. He's at 70%, been stuck there. I got a
Wow.
guy that's a Lance Corporal that did probably 7 years, has 4,000 pages of evidence. It's 100% permanent total.
Yeah.
They got a 10-year age gap too.
Hmm.
The E9 is obviously much older. He's, I think now, he's 50,
Yeah.
and the other Lance Corporal is probably 30, 32, 33. So
Wow.
yes, logically you would think the more time you spend in the military, that it equates to a better rating. But unfortunately, the reality is whoever has the best paperwork is the one that's going to win the
Yeah.
game.
And I
In
was just about
regards
to
to,
say that, right? Because
yeah,
it boils down to document it, right? So,
documentation. Right.
growing up as a grunt, like you never went to sick call, right?
Right.
Like
The 11 Bravos, 13 Bravos, yeah, they don't go.
yeah, like I could have a lung hanging out and I'm bleeding, and I'm just going to throw some tape on it and continue to work, and that's a fault in the system, right?
It
Because
is a
as
fun
leaders,
system.
it's a leadership thing. Like as a leader, it's like,
Yeah.
hey man, you're hurt, go get checked out,
Yeah.
right? And it seems super simple. Like, look, take your butt to the aid station and get looked at, you know, and that one piece of paper may be the difference between, 0 and 10,
Or
or
100. Yeah.
right. And so like
Yeah.
that's part of the craziest aspect of it, is just it's retraining leaders to, care for soldiers, and sending them to the aid station and getting checked out when they're hurt.
But
Right.
do you think we really would be able to do that in the military? I mean, you and I both serve. Do you think that's really feasible without trying to circumvent those that's going to malinger? Because you're going to have soldiers that's going to play the system, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
malingerers, guys and gals that are hurt but aren't necessarily as hurt as they say they are, and
Yeah.
then of course those that are hurt, we need to take care of those guys. I'm a proponent for soldiers and Marines and sailors and airmen and Coast Guardsmen and women taking care of their troops and their fleet and so forth. But the other side of me being in the military, I don't think it's really a reality. I don't think it's going to
Yeah,
happen. But what do you think?
I think it's a balancing act, right? And I
Yeah,
say this all the time. It goes back to there's a difference between saying you take care of soldiers and actually doing it, right?
exactly.
And
Yeah,
so, like, look, if I know somebody's hurting, it's kind of like why do we run in airborne school? And like this is the hidden gem of why you run the freaking airborne shuffle in airborne school. Why?
mhm,
So I can identify who's hurt, right? That's part of it. We run slow and
yeah,
painful for 4 miles, so I can say, hey, that dude's been limping for 2 miles. You're gonna go get checked out,
yeah,
right? And like that's how you do it. And it sucks because I have to apply pain
yeah.
to
To get a result.
cut through all the other BS, right? Because if I
Yeah,
just ask the kid, like, hey, are you injured? No, I'm fine. All right. So at mile 3, when this kid is like gimping and about to fall out, I know that there's actually something legitimately wrong. But did I exacerbate the injury to get to that point?
Yeah.
Right. And that's part of the culture that's very, very difficult to balance, right? Because again, like, hey, if I can't, if I'm not running down our dens at freaking, you know, 6:15 pace for 7 miles, then I'm failing as a leader. Well, that's part
Hmm.
of it. But the other part of it is how many people in your formation legitimately got injured versus the guys that have a cardiovascular problem that need to work,
Yeah,
that need to run a little bit more. And I think,
absolutely.
the Army is trying to get smarter with that. When you look at the health and fitness teams that they're putting together and having, H2F in the formations to help, have a better understanding of medically what's going on with the soldiers and like having a PA, like a physical therapist, an athletic trainer, look at these injuries to make sure that like, hey, is this real or is this Memorex? All right, this is something
Hmm.
that I can tape up and you can continue. No, you got to go get an X-ray or an MRI. You know,
Right.
and I think that aspect of it's getting better, but one of the inconsistencies is it goes back to leadership, right? So like, hey, look, we know that the way that the Army PT test is now significantly more problematic than it was when you're just doing push-ups, sit-ups, 2 mile run. I can do that anytime,
Yeah. Yeah,
right? I can
absolutely.
assess your fitness based off of that rudimentary PT test that everybody complained about. Like, oh, it's not cool enough. Okay, look, man, I was 47 years old when they said, hey, we're going to add deadlifts to the PT test. Like, I'm a meathead. I've been in the gym. I played high school and college football. So going to the gym and deadlifting is not a problem for me.
Right.
But my buddy, who is a runner, ran track in high school, ran track in college. Now he's a 50 something year old colonel on the tail end of 26 or 27 years of his career. That guy's not learning how to deadlift.
No.
It's not his thing. He's not, you know what I mean? It's not his thing. He never learned how. And so
Right.
now there's this big disjunct between the leaders in this organization that are supposed to be adjudicating and providing the platform for these kids to take this test, that they can't take the test because they're either too far gone or too old in their career to really understand it. And then we're asking them to evaluate things that they don't understand,
Right.
you know? And so that it's kind of the same thing with like going into the VA and getting your medical documents processed. Like if I don't know, like if I come in and like, hey, look, I got all these elements, this has got to be 100%, but I don't understand how they rate, then I'm not going to get 100%. And I think that's part of the problem too, is like we have a bunch of people in the military, all great folks. And I say this all the time. It's like there's no bad people in the military, just varying degrees of professionalism. And
Hmm.
so we have
Hmm.
to figure out how to balance that. How do we take care of those kids? How do we observe and identify somebody that's legitimately injured
Yeah.
versus somebody that's faking the funk to get out of the jump or whatever it
Right.
is. And so
Right.
like there's you know leaders are involved in that 100%, but there's got to be is there a biometric way to do it? Like probably so, but that way to track those people is probably very expensive and the Army
I,
doesn't
I
want to
was gonna
buy
say
that.
that's very expensive.
Right. So like, yeah, we want to do biometric analysis. That sounds cool. Sounds great. It's a science experiment. How many people can we cover with it? Well, we might be able to get a platoon, you know, so we'll know the health and fitness of one platoon in an entire BCT, you
Right.
know, and because the price point would be too much for anyone else. But
Absolutely.
so we covered a lot of ground, but this is great. But let's circle back to you know what was the hardest thing about transitioning out of the military? Because I mean, with the finance background, you can basically go wherever you want, and there's always
Yeah.
people looking for highly skilled financial managers.
Hmm.
But what was that like? Why did you decide to pull the trigger? Were you just done? Were you seeing better opportunities, or was it just like, hey, I think I want to continue to serve and just do it in a different way?
Yeah. So I used to be ashamed that I didn't struggle to get out of the military. I had no transition problems whatsoever. And for a while, that made me feel as if maybe I didn't. It made me feel some type of way. I don't know how to put it in words, but for me, while I was in the military, I was in Iraq in 2008. The market crash happened. I ended up buying a lot of shares of Ford Motor
Mhm.
Company.
Oh wow.
The big bailout came. I think GM took the bailout and some other companies did. Ford did not. And I just understood their balance sheet very well. And I thought it would be a really good investment. So I took a part of my my combat pay that I was getting, the overage, and put it into
Mhm.
Ford. I bought Ford when it was probably $1 and some change. It was maybe $2 per share. And I ended up cashing out when it was about $20 a share a few
Oh
years
wow.
later.
Jeez.
And I was E4 at the time, and I was going to get E5, and then E5 was so much more responsibilities. I was like, you know what? I actually make way more money as an E4 trading the market and just serving than being an E5 and taking time away from my ability to do other things. So I got to Fort Lewis, and as I got to Fort Lewis, I ended up going to buy a car. I was going to buy a Dodge Charger on 24-inch wheels at the time. I think I was like 22 at the time, and I ended up not buying the car. But the guy that I met was a finance manager. He says, "Look, you have a really good way to communicate with people. I think there's an opportunity for you here. If you can bring me soldiers to buy cars and they buy the cars, we'll pay you out." And they showed me the numbers, and I said, "Okay, I can do that." So I started just going on base. I've always had an ability to attract people to me, and an ability to service people as well and offer value, and offer a lot of value. I gave them a ride. I explained the terms, conditions, the APR rates. Some of the guys in best interest, you can't buy this vehicle, and they appreciated me for that. And then I just kept it honest with troops about their financial position, their honest financial position, what they really can afford, and that ended up turning into making an extra maybe 7 or 8 grand per month as an E4 on top of my stocks. And
Oh
that's when
wow.
I got the picture like I probably should leave the military.
Mhm.
For one, my chain of command at the time hated me for that. I was driving a 750 Li BMW as an E4 that was paid off, by the way, and that attracts some eyes because most E4s aren't managing their money. And I was here. I just bought a new house for 180,000 out in Tacoma, Washington. I got a new car, a $80,000 vehicle that I paid cash for. And I just was good on money, and they couldn't believe it. And so I had this mini investigation launched to see like where is Sampson getting all this money from. And they come to find out that after my military time, meaning from 0630 to 1700, I would go on the dealership and manage deals. And so I was working every single day and twice on Sunday as well as
Mhm.
on Saturday. My entire Saturday was focused on working. I wasn't out at the club with the guys every now and again, maybe, but I wasn't out at the club with the guys. I wasn't drinking at the barracks. I was literally working my rear end off every 7 days a week.
Hmm.
And I ended up ended up getting a stockpile of money. And it came to the point where being out of the military was more fruitful for me than being in the military because
Yeah.
I couldn't control my time. My time was got to go to the field. We got to deploy. You got to be in formation. You got to go run PT. I was like, man, screw this. I got other things I got going on. And so I left. My chain of command supported me at the end. Getting there was not much support. They really
Yeah.
never seen a soldier being able to do the things I was doing in the civilian space, but still also keep my military bearing because I wasn't getting any trouble. I wasn't a bad soldier. I just um I just I guess opposed their position of me moving up the rank to E5 and E6 and leadership
Yeah.
roles. I had other things going on, and so I just played my roles at E4. And towards the end, they actually gave me it's called a school drop, where DoD come down to your unit and says, "We feel as if you're going to offer the world so much value that we're going
Mhm.
to let you go from your contract early, and we wish you the best." And that's what happened.
Wow.
I end up saying I left early, and I said I have to go back to work for DoD in some capacity. Ended up at the VA first, and then got to the Pentagon, and that was my way of giving back. Of like just telling other troops, I would meet guys that were retiring, 3-star, 4-star generals that I was dealing with on a day-to-day basis, lieutenant colonels, a couple E9s, E8s, most E7 and above that I was
Yeah.
dealing with, and I would just explain to them, here are your options if you want to retire. Here's what you can do. And if you want to stay in, here's how it affects you long term. If 25 years you're here, 30 years you're there. And yeah, so that's my
Hmm.
transition was very smooth. I thought it all the way out. I had a plan. I worked my plan for about a year prior. I had a plan to stay in and a plan to get out. I was going to go green and go and become an officer.
Mhm.
And the benefits that was happening in the market at the time was just in my favor. And I felt like if I remained consistent, I would never lose. And that was that was 14 years ago. I was
Yeah.
25 years old when I left the military. I'm 39 now. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I mean, I guess the ultimate part to the listening audience is like have a plan, right? Like that's ultimately what it boils down to. Have a plan and
Yeah.
stick to it. And
Work the plan.
and you had branches and sequels too. So you had
Yeah.
two tracks that you're working like, hey, if things are going well, I'm going to do this. If things are going moderately, I'm going to do this. If things are not going well, I'm going to do this. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of veterans, like when it comes to military operations, we're great at planning contingencies.
Yeah.
But when it comes to our own personal lives, we're not great at planning contingencies. and there's a lot of people, and and there's a lot of people in the popular lexicon that will tell you like, oh, don't have a plan B. Like you just got to be extreme and do this and blah 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 blah. And anybody that says that, it's like, dude, you're an incredibly talented human, and I don't
Yeah.
want to take anything away from you, but you're giving people bad gouge. And the reason
Yeah.
why I say that is because uh, about three-quarters of the way through the book called Grit, right? And that book literally talks about like, hey, as a young person, if you don't develop grit, you're not going to be a gritty old person, right? So
Exactly.
like, there's people, there's people in your life that that like, man, that guy's like just tough and hard working person, and that guy's going to dig into it. And the reality of it is like, if you find your passion and you stick with it, you're going to be okay. I think a
Absolutely.
lot of people, some people come to the military because like my generation of folks was like, oh, I joined the military so I could get my college paid for. There's a lot of people that would say that, or like, hey, I did this because I thought it was cool. Then 9/11 happened, and then we had people that were serving for patriotism, which was a completely
Mhm.
different reason than hey, I came in when there was no war. So it's like, well, I hope something happens, because like it would be a waste to go through 4 years of college and sit around for 20 years and not do anything.
Yeah.
And then 9/11 happened, and I think we all got some, and then and then. But
Mhm.
so transitioning out of the military, you went to work for the DoD. Sounds like both of those were rewarding and fulfilling jobs, and then you're like, hey, I'm going to spend this out and do this on my own. What was the hardest part about establishing your own business? Because you said you launched that about 2014. You're looking,
2014.
you're closing in on just over, well, you're over a decade in the
Yeah.
business. So
Yeah.
what made you pull the trigger on that? Because I mean, again, from a standpoint of serving veterans, that's great because that gives you a purpose. But financially, the payout could be 6 months
Nothing up front. Yeah.
to
Exactly.
6 months to a year out, depending upon how long the process goes. And
Yeah.
so, you know, and I think a lot of people miss that when it comes to like getting veteran support services like yours.
Yeah.
Is like, people think that like, oh, I got to put this guy in retainer and pay him a whole bunch of money, and then when I finally get my rating, I'm not gonna, it's not gonna be worth the money that I paid this person. And those are the bad ones, folks. Like the good ones are
Yeah.
like, hey, look, let's do the paperwork, and when the
Yep.
chips fall and the dust settles, we'll settle up at the end.
Yep.
And you know, from a standpoint, some people don't like that, but I also think that for me as a veteran to look at that and say, like, wow, like this dude is really, you're taking a chance, because
Mhm.
not all cases are going to end up. And like you said, if you're looking at 4,000 pages of documents, and the person gets a 30% rating, and then you got to then you got to appeal it to get a higher rating, like that's 4 to 6 months for the evaluation, another 4 to 6 months for the appeal. So like you're 8 months in, you're probably 12 months into this thing before money exchanges at hands at all for your service. So
That's
you know
correct.
what what made you just what made you decide to pull the trigger on something like that? Because there's a thousand different ways that you can
Mhm.
help veterans, and not always is it for profit. But I think there's a balance there, and just what made you say like, hey, look, I'm good with my money. I have this entrepreneurial spirit. How can I help other people? Because that's just not something that people that are affluent don't do that normally.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so
Yep.
that's basically a long way of getting to that point.
Yeah. It was the people. It was the people, Raw. I never ever wanted to do a VA claims business. That was never my goal. I'm a finance guy. My goal, I worked in Washington, D.C. at the Appeals Management Center at the VA, and right next to it was Stanley Morgan. And I was petitioning to go over there and get my Series 7s and be a stockbroker. That's more my flavor, being able to advise people on commodities, stocks, mutual funds, indexes, find ways in the market. I'm in the private equity space because I've just been in business for so long.
Mm.
But at the time I was not thinking about PE. Now PE is more my flavor. But to answer your question, it was the people, Rob. The veterans just could not let me go. And so in 2014, that's when I started offering it for free around the country. I had people that would call me, veterans, we're very tight knit community. I do Rob well. Rob tells John, John tells Sarah, and the word just
Yeah.
travels, right? And
Mm.
so that's what was happening for me at the Pentagon. I was at the Pentagon, and folks knew that I came from the VA. And the federal government is real funny. People, if they know you came from another unit or another organization, and they know what your series was, which my series was 099, I think 0995, if my memory serves me correctly, which is a veterans claims examiner. They know exactly what I did for a living at the VA. And so veterans that were at the Pentagon that already transitioned were asking me, hey, I'm at 70%. How do I get my claim up? I heard you the guy to get 100%. I'm like, yeah, come, let me see your claim. And while I was in my day-to-day work, I was helping these guys with their claims. And then, Rob, it just overwhelmed. Consultant firms, NGOs, law firms started calling me, asking me how do raters make their decisions. Because when I was a rater, I was the one that was making decisions, and I was also involved in policy work too. I was lobbying as well on Capitol Hill. And so a lot of folks were reaching out to me, asking me, how do raters make their decisions? And I just broke it down to them, each case by case. And it ended up becoming result after result after result. So in 2015, I got overwhelmed. Late 2014, I got overwhelmed. And in 2015, I actually incorporated the business as a corporation, whereas it was an LLC first, and then we grew tremendously. Now we're S corporation. But to answer your question, it was the people. I actually was going to close the business down 2 separate times over the last 10 years because I got tired of business, and there's a lot of money in this business. People think that there's a lot of money into it. I mean, there is money. Don't get me wrong. We do make great money. I'm not going to lie about that. But the initial buildup takes about 3 years to be able to float payroll.
Yeah. Well, and I think, and I think that's part of it too. And like, people are out there and they think like every veteran support organization is a shark, right? Like that's just it's the inherent skepticism that comes from being in the military. Like,
yeah,
hey
I
man,
comes from in the military. Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like that's just part of who we are. Like, hey, make sure your room's clean. The general's coming through the barracks, right? How many times have we heard that? Everybody's heard that. Everyone's heard it. Like, hey, make sure that the motor pool's straight because CG's coming down. So you're standing there at 1800. I guess CG's not coming down. You know what I mean? Like, so we've all experienced that. So there's that inherent skepticism. And like I said, it goes back to what I mentioned earlier. It's like you get what you pay for, right? Like, yeah, I can do it for free. Like I have this buddy that's an excellent freaking, appeals writer or claims writer, and he can do it great. Well, where is he?
And that may work though. And that may just work.
And 100%. But like, if you have something wonky or crazy or like, oh, hey man, like, I've got to go back and track down people in my unit that were, 10, 15, 20 years ago and try and get, and trying to get a sworn statement that's saying like, like this is the scenario as it went down. I'm willing to sign my name on the dotted line to help, my Ranger buddy over here, get his VA claim. And that's hard to do, and I will tell you, like one of the best things that I ever had is like when I was a young company commander, like we had guys that got hurt, and our senior medic was a Desert Storm veteran. So Sergeant Thompson, wherever he is out there, I appreciate his work because what Sergeant Thompson did for every person that got injured while we were on deployment, he did the casualty feeder report. He's like, you know what I mean? He's like, hey, I don't care if you get a Purple Heart or not. If I see you in the aid station, we're doing the casualty feeder report. So like when you're 30 years old at the end of your service, or you're getting towards the end of your time in the military, you're not hunting for an answer. Right. And that was super helpful for a lot of people. And again, like the people that kind of slipped through the cracks were the guys that were like, oh, I was afraid to go to the aid station because I was going to get redeployed or whatever it was. And it's like, there's always going to be that percentage of people in the military. And I think really organizations like yours and some of the other organizations that take payments are to help process those kind of weirdo cases. You know what I mean? Like those, like that's the caseload that needs the most help. Because Absolutely. Like if your local VSO could handle it, then it would have been done the first time.
We wouldn't be in business if that was the case.
Yeah, and that's part of it. So that just reminds me. Go ahead.
And we tell folks, we tell folks. We get about 150 veterans that call us every single day from around the country, and we work with about maybe 3,000 of them become our clients throughout the years, right? Each year, about 3,000 veterans per year. We tell folks, if you can do it yourself, or if you find a free resource that works for you, by all means, go do it. The goal, of course, is to promote choice and to also give them an option out if they can't find an option out. Now, if you're coming to us, we deal with very highly special cases. Even lawyers come to us about certain cases that we're dealing with. All of us worked in the policy level at the VA. We all were raters and policymakers. So we understand this stuff hand and out. We can look at a case and tell you exactly how it's going to work. So I guess that's the upside for us. I'm gonna turn my light on real quick.
Yeah. That's pretty tremendous, though. I
Always
appreciate it.
has this motion sensor, so if I sit still too long, it turns off. My apologies, Rob.
No, that's fine. That's probably a note to get up and start moving again, right? But
But normally
yeah,
this is a stand-up desk. Normally I'm standing up, but I figured for today's call I sit down and
yeah.
relax.
No, I really appreciate you taking your time, because like this is important. And like, look, folks, if you're listening to this, please understand that like this is not shameless promotion. This is two veterans talking, right? And that
Yeah,
like
we just chit-chatting.
that's the thing about this, and that's why I love doing this podcast, is because I get to talk to different people from different walks of life and different experiences. And you know, and I tell you, like, there are people out there that are suffering. Like, I have a friend of
Oh
mine
yeah.
that's been in, he got out in 2005, and like the VA in 2005 is completely different from the VA in 2025, right? And so like there's a large portion of veterans that are out there on the street that were not diagnosed, misdiagnosed, you know, uh maybe got the lesser of what they should have
Oh yeah.
received, just because the system was different back then. And I
Absolutely.
don't mean like the processing and like the pyramid and the whole body concept has always been the same, but the
Hmm.
people who were processing it were different. And so
Absolutely.
like
Their
if I
understanding of it.
yeah, so if I approach you today in 2025, your understanding of it is significantly different from like your counterpart who was working in the VA in 2000. And
Absolutely.
I think that there's something to be said about that. And it's just like anything else. Veterans are generational. So is the
Yep,
VA, right?
yep.
And so there's generations in the VA where like they were better at doing some things and worse at doing others. But at the end of the day, ultimately, what it boils down to is, you know, if you're not sure, ask somebody. And at the very
Mhm.
least, and like you said, if you tell them like, hey, I'm just trying to generate an option for you, give them a call. Like,
Yeah.
what's the worst that can happen? It's like, hey, we can do the intake form. It's like, you could probably do this yourself.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I tell folks, if you're competent enough to do yourself, then great. That sounds good. And we also tell veterans, we get veterans that, and thank you for understanding the business model, because I get on calls with folks that go either way, support, not support. And I'm okay with it either way because I've been doing this for a long time. I know what my clients want.
Mhm.
But we also have veterans that call us and say, well, I'm not paying for nothing. Well, great. You have free options. If they mess your case up, coming to us, we say if they F your case up, bring it to us and we un-F it. That's what we normally say.
Yeah.
And then of course we get these veterans that come back to us a year later with a much different case than it was before when they came to us, and it's messed up, and we end up fixing it for them in some
Yeah.
capacity if it's repairable. So
Well, and
there's
and
that as
and
well.
and that's the other part of it. And I think that's the hidden aspect of the whole thing, right? It's like, do I want this thing to take a chance on me completely breaking it
Right.
before, because sometimes like you can get yourself in a position where all your paperwork may be correct, but the evaluation is basically puts you in a position where you can't appeal, right? Or you've done too
Yeah.
many appeals, and then like there's no moving that number, right? And I think that's one of the other nuances about the system is like, hey, like, you got to strike while the iron's hot. So like if you get that initial rating, you need to get your first appeal in and go after that second rating within 90 to 120 days of getting that rating. Because if you wait, like, the longer you wait, the less opportunity that you have to really get in there and I won't say hit a home run, but get the full compensation that you deserve.
Yeah.
Because
Especially
there's
as you age too. A
yeah,
lot of cases I've denied before because of aging. It was more
yeah,
likely than not due to just the body aging itself versus the natural progression of the disability. So
yeah,
yes, to your point, doing it early and often is very smart because it gives you the opportunity to really communicate at a younger age. And when I say younger age, I mean this is 5 years post-military, even maybe 55 or 60. I'm
yeah,
not saying younger ages for like 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds, but yeah, younger age as far as your time after the military service is important to capture that, because you're able to not be a victim of, oh, you're aging, and because you are aging and you've been out of the military for 20, 30 years, it's because of your aging, not versus just the
yeah.
development of the
Like
disability.
perfect example. It's like if you claim eye strain and you've been in the army for 20 years, you're probably not going to get that. You know what I mean? Like, because eye
Right.
strain it's just natural progression of getting older. Like, you may need reading glasses. That's not the army's fault. That's because you're 50. And
Yeah.
like you said, that's very important. But
And it doesn't pay much neither. So I would also encourage listeners, like, look for disabilities that pay the most.
yeah,
Anything that has an insurance incentive, vision, dental, and hearing, you're not getting much for it. When
yeah,
have you ever seen a veteran get a service connection for hearing loss? I I've dealt with probably 35, 40,000 cases in my 12 years of doing veterans claims. I've only seen maybe 2 or 3 that have gotten service connection in excess of 10% for hearing loss. And one was a client that got shot in her ear and the bullet went in one ear out the other. She got 60% for hearing loss. Come on, man. That is so,
Yeah.
so you don't get much for hearing loss. Your goal is to get tinnitus at 10%, which sometimes is almost given to you depending on your MOS. And then vision, vision cases are the most difficult cases for raters to rate. That's inside knowledge. So you're not getting much money on them anyways, because it's already frustrating. And then secondly, the rating schedule doesn't give much for vision loss anyways, unless you're blind in one eye or blind in both eyes, then that's a whole different conversation. And then of course, dental is taken care of by dental. So unless you have TMJ, which is the only rating that I know of that's going to give you anything in excess of 10%, you can get 40 for TMJ, then they go after it. You'd be surprised how many disabilities that are unseen that have the larger payouts. Case in point, migraines, mental health, sleep apnea, hyperthyroidism, the internal organs versus the knee and the back limping, which I think we should also talk about. There's a lot of veterans that say, well, you're not on a cane. You can drive, you can run and walk. Just because that veteran's in good shape and he or she can run and walk a mile or two does not mean they're not disabled. There's also that as well in the community. And I think that should be answered too. There should be something said about that.
Well, I think like the whole phrase I'm not as good as I once was is actually true as a veteran, right? Like just because I look, just because I look healthy does not mean everything is working the way that it was when I was 18. Right.
Exactly.
And that's ultimately what it is like the compensation is not so much to be, and I've heard people talk about this, and I know I have a friend of mine that ran for Congress, and one of his platforms and one of his discussion was, it's like, hey, look, disabled veterans 100% permanent and total, and the use of service animals, right? And that's his thing, and that's what he sticks on. But it's like, hey, look, if it's possible for us to rehabilitate a veteran after their service, to take them down from like 100% disability to get them to where somebody, like, say for instance, go back into the vision thing, right? Like I get 10% evaluation for vision or whatever. Is there a surgery that I can do one time, like LASIK or something that could correct that vision thing, and then the VA doesn't have to pay for it? So which would you rather have? Would you rather have LASIK eye surgery or $100 a month for the rest of your life? Like I would rather be able to see, you know what I mean? And so I think that's one of the interventions that like not a lot of people talk about. I don't want to say interventions, but I think that's one of the things that like we haven't really worked through. Like, hey, look, if a guy has a torn labrum and he gets 30% for that, is it possible for us to surgically repair that? Because the cost of the surgery will be much less than this guy running around with 20 or 30% disability for the rest of his life.
Time value of money. Yep.
And you also have to think about it over time. That joint's eventually going to degrade anyway. So how do we take care? Better to fix it now. And like you said, time value of money. If I fix it now, it's going to be worth much more later than it is like, oh crap, this guy's 60 years old and he busted up his shoulder jumping at Fort Bragg in freaking 2000. And now it's, 2027 or 2037 and the guy's still injured, and so it's just little things like that. And I don't know the answer, I don't have an answer for that one, but I think that's something that I think a lot of people, if given the option, they may take that, like, hey, look, like if I can get something surgically repaired, but not claim it against the VA, I would take the surgery if I know that it's going to take care of me, it's going to increase my quality of life. And I think that's ultimately what it boils down to is like, hey, look, VA compensation is not about you getting paid for your service because of injury. It's to give you the quality of life that you can or cannot have based off of your injuries that you incurred during service.
Yeah, it's a settlement of damages. That's basically what it is. It's a settlement of damages.
And that's probably a good way to look at it. So the last question that I'll ask you is like, so you've done quite a few things. So as you were transitioning out of the military, it sounds like you significantly had a plan. You transitioned out of the government service, you had a plan. So what piece of advice that somebody gave you, or what piece of advice that you gave somebody that turned out to be helpful? Because it sounds like you had a pretty smooth transition. So was there anything that somebody communicated to you, or that you ever communicated to someone that like helped them ease into, the time after the uniform?
I think for me, I just took the Army's. I always was told if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, and I just really take that to heart. And so I took that, I guess, cliched statement and applied it in real time to everything I was doing. I was intentional about everything. And that was from me becoming an officer to me also, becoming a civilian. I literally was able to do either one. And so for me, what helped me as far as what was told to me was, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And failure was not an option for me. And secondly, my bank account obviously was able to tell the story of like, hey, if you continue to do this, you will continue to make more money and you can support your family in a different way than that you ever thought you ever could. And so those things become realities to me. And once you're knee deep into a business, it's like, we're going forward with this. Like it's going to happen regardless. And so for me, it was, I was really afraid of failure. I did not want to fail. I'm still that way in my life as a seasoned executive. I am afraid of failure. And speaking of failure, I took the NFL exam last year and failed it, and it just crushed me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was afraid of failure, and I wanted to work and I wanted to make it happen for myself. And what I tell other people is the same thing. You have to really have that grit about yourself, and you have to really want it. You got to really, how bad do you want it? Do you really, really want it? That extra rep you could have done, that extra hour of sleep you could have gotten, that extra piece of effort you got. Like when I played football, we had a thing of leave it all in the field. That was from high school to college to NFL. Leave it all in the field. If you don't leave it all in the field, you're not working well for your teammate. The same way in the Army. In the military, we got to take care of our battle buddy. We got to leave it all in the field. And if you apply those principles to your personal life, I think you'll see a lot of great change in regards to getting your goals. And goals are different. Some guys want to be multimillionaires. Some guys just want to pay their bills on time. It depends what your goals are.
Yeah. And I think that's part of it too, is like, I think realistic expectations are part of it. Like back in the day, in the beginning of the global war on terrorism, they pulled General Schoonmaker out of retirement. And one of the things that General Schoonmaker said all the time was, do not confuse, enthusiasm for capability. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So just because you want it in your heart doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be the outcome for you. Like you can work really, really hard for it. And it's like, hey, look, if I'm shooting for the stars and I miss, I jump pretty high,
Yeah, absolutely.
you know what I mean? Like I'm up there. But if I plan to just, get to the top of the steps, that's probably all I'll ever get to, So I think that's a really good lesson to take from just in the transition piece, man. Like, we're going to wrap this up, man. Like I could probably go another hour or so, because I'd really want to dive into your NFL stuff, because like that's
NFL. I gotta make it quick. It's super quick if you want to jump into it.
But but for me, like one of the things that people desire is just like, how do I get into all these different spaces? And I know some folks that are in some private capital. Like I got some friends of mine that are doing that, the PE stuff, and that is that's kind of like, that's like I won't say the hidden gem, because it's very obvious, because family offices are what they are.
Yeah.
But cracking, breaking into the barrier to entry is probably the way that I would say it. The barrier to entry into private capital, or the barrier to entry into, managing large amounts of finances, you have to be really good to get into those places. And so,
absolutely.
To get into the NFL, like I know it's more than probably just an exam. So tell us how that went, and what made you desire to do that? Because I know, it makes sense. If I'm a private capital guy, then I can help these guys invest some of their future, or some of their earnings, into something that could be good for their future.
That's what people think, Rob. But no, I never wanted to come from the private equity standpoint. So in Seven Principles, we have a VA claims division, real estate division, and a mortgage division. I created a private equity division because I buy a lot of real estate and I flip a lot of houses and that kind of thing. And that got bored really quick. And so I wanted to start building neighborhoods, subdivisions, and apartment complexes. So obviously I don't have, $300-400 million liquid capital to do that. So I have to, put up my money, which I may put up, $4 or $5 million of my own capital. And then that helps me get permits, design, land acquisition, and then developers, and that kind of thing, and develop apartment complex. But the NFL came from a colleague of mine that was going for his neurocognitive disability. And I understood the NFL's process on disability benefits, and it mirrors the VA's. And you'd be surprised, Rob, of the transition trauma that NFL veterans have. The military veterans is almost it's mirrored. It's almost apples to apples, man. Yeah. I have been dealing with military veterans for, like I said, 12 years, and the struggle a military veteran has, with an NFL veteran, it's the same. Only difference is the earning potential over their career is different.
Yeah.
So an NFL veteran, he may do, most NFL guys, they do at least 3 to 4 years. They do one contract in the National Football League. And then from there, they transition out or they get a second contract or something to that effect.
Yeah.
They may make, let's say, $25 million. Well, it depends on where you are. There's some guys in the NFL that's not making good money. It depends what you call good money. Good money to me is making at least $5 million a year. There are some guys in the NFL that are only making league minimum, which is under $1 million. Yeah. And when you add taxes, agent fees, they're bringing home the same thing as a guy that's a 06 that's bringing home, or 07. If he has his money right, he's got some passive income coming in and so forth. So I saw a very clear dichotomy between NFL veterans and military veterans. And I wanted to crack into that space. I didn't really know how to do it. I had the money to do it, but NFL, the money is a little different. You need to come with, $3-4 million of capital to run an ad campaign to get into all these different arenas. And I just felt like I didn't have to do all that. So I decided that I was going to figure this out some way. I talked to one of my colleagues. He says, why don't you represent the guys? And I was like, I never thought I'd represent. He said, well, you already represent military veterans. Why don't you represent them too? And I said, yeah, let me figure it out. So I got in touch with NFLPA. And the process is you pay $2,500 and then you sit for an exam and you go through, they put you through a financial check, a credit check, and a background check. And so they want to make sure that, you're up to par. You are who you say you are. And, I don't know if they have a net worth requirement, but I'm willing to say they probably do. By the questions they asked me during my background check, they asked about different properties I own and different assets I had in the back in the day, like 10 years ago. And so you take an exam. It's 60 questions, 3 hours long. It's a brutal exam. I actually took it for the second time yesterday on the 21st of July. I took it last year and I failed by one question. Yesterday, I felt a lot more confident in my abilities to perform and score. Hopefully I passed. They don't tell you until after Labor Day, but it's a 60-question exam and it covers nothing about football. Nothing on this about football.
Yeah, of course.
Nothing about football. And a lot of people, they mistake themselves thinking that they're going to be talking about, Matt Ryan and whoever else in the league nowadays that's the hottest guy, CJ Stroud and Russell Wilson. It's nothing about these guys at all. It's about how the NFL works from a business standpoint. Yeah. And so I took the test yesterday. I found out on Labor Day, but my position is I feel very confident I can offer my client, which in this case would be an NFL player, I can offer them a greater service by representing them in front of all National Football League teams, all 32 of them, and being able to help them understand why you're in this position and you're making $4 million a year, or if you're making $840,000 a year, whatever it is, there's a way to put your money to use. So when you leave, you have a career waiting for you, you have opportunities waiting for you, and you don't feel overwhelmed to figure out something at the last minute. Guys get cut. The NFL is different than the military. Guys get cut. You get released and waived. And when you get cut and released and waived, it's hard to figure out how to rebound from that. And these guys go through a lot of trauma trying to figure out where they're going to play football next, whether it's going to be in Miami or whether it's going to be in Los Angeles. So, or Houston, where I live at, or in New York, wherever.
Yeah. That's very, very similar. It's kind of like when it's like moving sidewalk, like being in those positions, like being on a moving sidewalk, and then suddenly it stops and you don't get the heads up.
Exactly. Yeah. It just
wow, that's crazy.
So stop. And these guys have lives. They have a lot of stuff they've gained over their playing career. So I felt I could offer value to them. And then a lot of guys in the National Football League sort of reaching out to me from agents and other players. And that gave me the motivation to really buckle down and study the material and hopefully pass. I took the test, like I said yesterday. Test is brutal. It's $2,500 just to take the test. You only get 2 chances.
Oh wow! So good luck on the second swing, man. And like I said, like this has been a pleasure. And folks, I'm going to wrap with this because this is very important. This is the power of LinkedIn, right? So I did a post a couple months ago. It's like, hey, look, if you're a veteran and you want to talk and tell your transition story, or just talk about your business. Like that's what we do here at Philosophy from the Frontline, is just talk. This has been a great conversation, man.
Absolutely.
I really enjoy these because, again, I learned about you, which is the first part of it, but I've also learned about like some of the other things that are out there and some pitfalls. And if you're listening to this and you know nothing about transitioning from the military, because like that's years down the road, have a plan. That the first thing that I would tell you is have a plan. And then the next part about it is make sure you have your assets, right? So, 7 principles is an asset for you if you need it. If you don't need it, that's fine. but better
Even
to,
better.
better to know that it's out there and it's available to you than not, and that's the other part. And good luck to you with the NFL stuff. I think,
Thank you,
you
Rob.
know, there is there's a there's a lot of similarities when you think about, just the way that business is done. Like
Oh, yeah.
we hear it all the time, like you're fighting in the trenches, like 100% in the aspect of like the mental and physical taxing that it takes to be successful. Like, they only think about it. There's, 32 teams
Yep.
with 7 rounds. They only
Yep.
take roughly with undrafted free agents, you're looking at 350 people a year. There's 117,000 college football players and they take
Yep.
300. So,
Yep.
it's very, very, again, it goes back to that barrier to entry. The barrier to entry is performance based. And how do I go from being like this top performing athlete from high school, college into the pros, and then all of a sudden have that stop? That's
Yep.
got to be traumatic, 100%.
Absolutely. And it's also evolving. In the NFL, they want to see where your head's at cognitively.
Yeah.
Are you a guy of good character? Can you represent the league very well? Can you represent the brand well? Back in the day, and I would say back in the days, as early as like 2010 time frame, 2005, you used to just get by with just being straight talented. Look at people like AB and Plaxico Bears. They were straight freak of natures, just talented, and teams were willing to put up with whatever they came with because it was worth it. But in today's growing economy in the NFL, they want more than just, hey, can you come in here and catch a touchdown or make a sack? They want to know, can you represent the brand well after the game in the community? So if kids that are listening to this, if you're playing in college or if you plan to play in college and you want to go to National Football League, the way to get there is through your demeanor, how you treat people, how you communicate when no one's watching. And because the NFL is very small, everybody communicates with each other.
Yeah.
Everybody communicates. It's like the military. It's a very small niche community. Not many people are in it, but everybody's interested in what it offers. And so if you can't meet that requirement of, man, I met Rob, great character, good guy, comes to practice on time. He's always leading the team. That's the guy I want. I want to give him the franchise tender. I want to give him the guaranteed for skill cap injury money. I want to give him that. And as long as guys that are listening to this are preparing to go to the league, understand that it's just as much as a cerebral performance as it is a physical performance, you'll do well in the league forever.
Yeah, that's awesome. Hey, so we're going to wrap this up. This has been Philosophy from the Front Line, episode number 103 with Chaz Sampson. Like, this was a great conversation, man. Like, I'm excited. Like, when we get off of here, I've got some other folks that I want to introduce you to because I've got some folks in the private capital space that I know. And I actually have a friend of mine that's a lobbyist as well.
Okay.
So there's some folks that may be interested to chat with you. But certainly, this was great. I appreciate it. And hey, guess what, folks? This is episode 103. We'll see you guys on the high ground. Thanks. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Philosophy from the Frontline. We hope today's conversation gave you valuable insights into the journey of veterans transitioning into the world of small business. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. It helps more people find us and supports our mission to empower veteran entrepreneurs. Stay connected with us on social media and visit our website for more resources, tips, and episodes. Remember, your service doesn't end when you take off the uniform. Your next mission is just beginning. Until next time, keep pushing forward, stay resilient, and turn your battle-tested skills into business success. This has been Philosophy from the Frontline, and we'll see you on the high ground. Thanks.